Whoa, this one's loud. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and do this demo for you. Hopefully they can hear us in the other lab. And I'm going to do the dentate patient first, since that's what you guys are trying to work on today. And then I'm going to go through an actual edentulous patient that I have in my faculty practice right now, so that you all can see what it looks like for a CD. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is just talk about what I have. I have a pencil. You can use a lead pencil. I like to use a red pencil. My flames, triad material, true tray, it's a white material, tin foil, cotton rolls, Vaseline, and both my regular buffalo knife and a 20 blade. Okay, it's about all I need to do this efficiently. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my tray extensions. Okay, so my patient here has a pretty deep palatal vault. Okay, so these walls are really steep and they're tall. Okay. So I don't have a big area to grab onto, but I have a flat area of this palate, so I've outlined that first. His fovea are somewhere right in here, so I want to make sure that I'm at least 2 millimeters posterior to that on my tray extension. Okay, I went a little bit more than that. I want to go through the hamular notches back here. And then I'm going to measure about 3-4 millimeters from the depth of the vestibule. I'm eyeballing this, okay? You guys are welcome to eyeball this. His frena here is not super evident, but if I color on it, you can see it there. So I'm going to make sure I give this frena is in its passive state right now. It's just resting right here, okay? So in order to have a custom tray that gives enough relief for this frena to move right and left, back and forth, I need to clear out all the way around it, okay? So I'm really going to scoop around 3 millimeters on either side, all sides of that frena. And I'm going to continue to come up. I'm probably more than 3 to 4 millimeters in this area right here, but because there's a big undercut there, I don't want my tray to be all the way sticking out like this. If my tray sticks out like this, the upper lip is going to stick out like that too. So I'm going to bring my tray a little bit shorter in this area where there's a severe undercut. In an edentulous patient, we don't have this problem. 1, because it's usually resorbed more, but 2, because if they have a big undercut, it's probably not going to be conducive to a denture, and you're going to have it surgically removed prior to making a denture, so we don't have to worry about it as much in that regard. Okay, so really clearing out around those frena, and that's the maxillary cast. So we're short everywhere of the depth of the vestibule. We have a palatal stop. Okay. The mandibular cast, I like to use references. Okay, so I've done my stops first over my first molar, my incisors, and the first molar on this side. When I cover all of this with wax, I am not going to be able to see those areas anymore. So what I do is I come out here onto the land area and I kind of draw 3 lines, 1 in the center and 1 on where the edges are, so that I know where to come back and cut away from. Up here in the front, I just drew a couple of lines that show me where those incisors are. Okay, you can also do a reference this way so you know how far back they are. The more you do this, the less you'll need these references, but it's just a good way for me to do it. So tray extension here, I have his retromolar pad. Some of you do and some of you don't. Can you all see how this goes up? And there's the retromolar pad right here. Okay, so my tray is going to come all the way back. If your cast stops here, that's just where your tray is going to stop for this project. Okay, I'm not going to fail you guys on a tray that doesn't cover a retromolar pad that you don't have captured. If you have it and you don't put your tray in it, that's a different story. So if it's there, make sure you cover it. Okay, then we're going to go 2 to 3, 4 millimeters short of the depth of the vestibule everywhere. I'm going to again cheat a little bit in this anterior where this undercut is, come up a little higher, go around the frena. Usually on the mandible, it's really just this one that is the main issue, because once these teeth are gone, this buccal shelf just kind of blows out and there's really not much there. Okay, this is a patient that is severely resorbed, so this is a good example, but you can see there's no real frena here. There's really nothing up here for her either. It's all kind of one continuous area. But each patient will have their own anatomy that they come with, and the challenge for you is to make sure that you maximize your tray design so you get all of that anatomy, okay? So now that everything's marked, I can go ahead and get started. And so I'll start with the maxilla first. The first thing I need is my base plate wax, okay? This stuff, I remember when I was in dental school, I hated base plate wax. It took me a very long time to figure out how base plate wax works well in your hands, okay? It's messy, it's not fun, it seems impossible to shape at first. Some of you will get it right away, others will struggle with it. I struggled with it. It was my least favorite thing to do, and now it's pretty easy, but it's all about temperature and controlling how moldable your wax is. So I like to hold it on the end and I run it through a flame. If you notice my flame, I don't know if you can see it in the demo or not, but I've got that bright blue cone in the middle. Okay, my flame's not all the way up here, it's about 1 inch tall. You can maximize the heat source, and I just lightly run it through here. Then I flip it over and I run this side. And I'm kind of just checking the consistency. Okay, so it's starting to get a little bit easier to move. Kind of heat up my my buffalo knife. I just use a buffalo knife to trim the wax portion of this, and you'll see I use the 20 blade for everything else. Okay, so I want to get a piece that's about the size of my cast. So you can see how now it's kind of just dropping on its own, right? So I don't want it to get runny. I want to be able to handle it, and I don't want it to get super thin. So my knife is warm, my wax is warm. I'm just going to cover the teeth at this point. So I cut it into the sections that I want, and I'm just going to wrap it around the teeth. Okay. And I'm working quickly while it's still warm. You don't have to work that quickly. You can do one piece and heat another piece. But basically what you want is to just start with this initial layer, okay? You can use your hand-out torch to reheat and readapt. You don't want to get this wax too hot. The hotter you get it, the thinner it's going to get. And if it gets too thin, then we don't have, you saw in my trays in the lecture, the impression material is already minimally thin, okay? So we don't want to over thin this. I'm just heating it to adapt it a little bit. Sorry about that, and don't want to burn up all the alcohol in there. So what I'm going to do now is there's excess, right? So I've got the wax layer over the teeth, but I also have this additional wax here. And I only want 1 layer. So when I put an additional layer of wax here, I'm going to end up with 2 layers here and 1 layer here. So I want to come back and I'm going to trim away anything that's kind of below the level of the teeth. And if you do this with a hot blade or a hot knife, it'll just pop off of there. Okay, it doesn't have to be super messy. You don't have to get it really hot. I mean, it's pretty brittle once it starts to cool, okay? So I'm going to just kind of go around the other areas and get rid of that. It's my burner phone ringing. No, it's really a patient phone. I keep it off usually, but you guys know Mary in OHR yet? Some of you have met her. She's like a bodyguard down there some days, but she calls it my burner phone. She thinks it's funny because it's like a $4 flip phone. Okay, so there's the teeth. Alright, so the next thing we need to talk about is undercuts, okay? So if you look at my lines, where they're going to be, there's not a severe undercut anywhere. Some of you are going to have severe undercuts, okay? Some of your trays are going to go down. If your tray goes down into this area right here, once it's cured, when you go to try to pull it off, it's going to snap all of your stone, okay? It's not going to come off of here. You need to have a path of insertion. You need to have a way to get this material on. Once it cures, it has to come off, okay? So I'm going to show you, even though I probably don't really need it in my case, I'm going to show you what that looks like, okay? So the way that I do block out is I just, again, take this back to the flame. I don't need a lot here. I just need a little. I'm going to get it a little bit warmer than I did that initial piece. And I'm just going to trim the edge, a thin layer. And sometimes you have to pick this up with the blade or the knife because it gets to the point that it's warm enough it'll stick. Okay. I'm going to push it down in here. Some people will take an instrument and like heat it and then dip it onto their wax like this and drip it in there. I like to work faster than that. This stuff's already pretty time consuming in patient care, and I don't like to take a lot of time. I just like to get the wax on there in an effective way that it's not too much. But you can see this is all arbitrary, right? This isn't real in the patient. So imagine that I just take this wax and it gets hard and I stick it up underneath your lip, your partner's lip. You're gonna see that it's there, right? Like you're gonna know because their lip's gonna stick out. You stick a cotton roll up underneath their lip, it makes their lip bigger. So anything that I put in here is going to increase the thickness of the lip, and I want it to be very minimal. So I'm gonna just start kind of pulling off some of this wax that I don't want. And if you have like a discoid cleoid or something, or even a Hollenbach that you can heat up and kind of push it in there, that will help. You just want it to be thin. I'm just going to use my knife because that's what I've got in front of me. But some of you will have to do this in order to make this work. And if the wax starts to come off the cast, just heat it again. And sometimes when you heat it, you can just let the excess that you don't want run away. Because here I want it to be thin, so I can overheat it and it not be an issue. Okay, so that's about adequate block out in that area. The thicker that gets, the thicker the custom tray, the further away the custom tray is going to be from the soft tissue, the further out your patient's lip's going to come. So just be mindful of that as you're doing it. I'm going to get another piece of wax here, because now we want to cover the rest of the layer. Okay, I'm going to do a little reference here, a little extension, so I know where my palatal stop's going to start. And now with edentulous patients, you can usually do this with one square of base plate wax. You guys have a big, right now these are going to be large custom trays because you have teeth, okay? So don't think that this is going to cover everything all in one try, all right? So what I like to do is get it close to my line on the outside where I have a reference, and then I'm just going to adapt it well everywhere else. Okay, so here I'm short of my red line, right? So I'm going to come in. Can you see that in the... I'm trying to find, there's where the camera is. Okay, so right here's my line. I have no relief here, so I need at least one layer there. So this is where I would come back with this original piece of wax and kind of just fill in the voids or fill in the gaps. And I only need one layer, so I don't have to get all excited. If you do this while it's still warm, can you all see that it's still pretty smooth? When I come back with a flame, I can really smooth those two layers together. Again, not getting it too hot, because if you get it too hot, it's just gonna melt and run away, or it's gonna get too thin. Okay, so just kind of warming it and letting the two fuse together. And now we need to finish this half, so I'm just gonna take the other half of that base plate wax, do the larger one so I don't burn my finger. I burn myself less with wax than I have with compound. Cross-residency, you do all of your own lab work. I think I processed 112 arches worth of dentures. It's a lot of wax to play with, a lot of opportunities to burn yourself. Okay, so here, where the two come together, I'm not gonna push that wax all the way against my cast. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of what I know I don't need, okay? Wax is a lot easier. It's a lot easier to play with and to mold when it's warm. Once it starts to harden, that's when it gets difficult and hard to work with, okay? So you wanna make sure, maximize your efforts and get rid of it while you can, while it's easy. And then you can just come back in and smooth it out. And so anytime you have to put wax together, you're going to get some rough areas. You're going to get some stuff that's not as pretty as it was before. That's okay. You want to just get it as even and smooth as you can. And it's easier I promise you it's easier in edentulous patients to do that because your wax will cover more surface area. So you can see how I kind of lost where I am. Now I can see the slope, but if I really wanted to, I can remove this wax, and now I have this reference of where my stop is. Like extended those red lines back. So I'm just going to heat up my buffalo knife, and I'm going to remove this wall of wax here. Make sure your knives are warm when you do this, really warm. Because if they're not, they'll just kind of score it and then it wants to break, fracture instead of trimming it off of there. Okay. I'm going to take his just a little bit wider just because it's going to go up the slope a little bit, but it's got kind of a little bit of a palatal torus here, so there's a bumpy area, and I want to just make sure that I've got good stability. So these are things that we can help you decide as you go along, okay? Don't stress about the little details right now. I want you guys to get the concept of what we're trying to do. So I know my lines are a little bit higher than all of this. I'm going to come back and I'm going to get really lucky and let you all see exactly where that line is, okay? And I'm going to trim out around the front of here. I know plenty of people who don't mark their casts. They just do this all by visual after the wax is on the cast, but for me, it's a good reference to come back and check my work, make sure that I am where I want to be, and it gives me an idea as I'm cutting away too that I'm where I'm supposed to be. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Pretty good. Do you all want me to do the mandible wax first or finish this one to completion first? Alright, I'll finish this one first. So I'm just heating it again. Can you all see how when I heat it, that wax just kind of fills in those voids and I can really smooth it up, okay? Is it 100% smooth? Is it perfect? No, but it's pretty close to what I want in my final contour. So now this is cooling. It's just about cool. What I want to do is put my tin foil. Remember in lecture I said this is your friend, okay? I'm going to adapt this tin foil to it. It will tear sometimes, especially if you have a really deep palette like we have here. So, but what I do is I start by pushing it onto the palette and then I roll it over the edges, okay? It will still sometimes rip on you, but if you get it pretty close, little voids are not a big deal. Overall, it'll still work. And I like to wrap it underneath my cast, anywhere that it'll reach far enough. Okay? Just so that it has a little more stability. Push it down. And then I'm going to take a cotton roll and I'm going to really adapt it. This is where you'll tend to tear it some, because it'll just, as it folds over itself, it gets thin and you'll rip it. But I'm really putting good pressure to eliminate as many of, not really eliminate the wrinkles. I don't care so much about wrinkles, but I just want the contour of that wax to be very evident. And I'm really digging it in on the sides here so that you can see that line. Okay. Can you all see that in the demo, in the screens? I'm trying to do camera and screen, so this will be beneficial for everybody, but a little bit of a challenge. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is Vaseline, because I want this tin foil to come out of my triad material easily. So I just dip my cotton roll in some Vaseline and do a thin layer everywhere. With teeth, you'll need a little bit more because you got more surface area to cover. This should be on the shelf. There should be a tube of Vaseline there. If not, I'll ask Kathy where it is. Alright, so again, because you all have teeth, you may need more triad than one sheet, okay? Most of the time, one plus a little bit for a handle will be enough. One thing I don't have, which I'd like to have, is some water, but I'll make it work. If you use water on your fingertip, the water will keep it from sticking, keep your fingers from sticking to the triad. One of the things also, where you have all these little flakes of wax, you want to get them out of your way because the wax is going to stick to your fingers and then it's going to stick into your triad material. And your patients appreciate it when these things look really clean. So I'm really adapting this. I'm putting firm pressure, but I'm not putting enough pressure to thin it out, okay? I want it adapted well and coming up over all of the edges, okay? So there's a couple of ways you can handle this when a triad tray isn't big enough, one sheet isn't big enough. You can start filling in the voids like it is here, or you can trim it. I like to trim and then add. I think it's easier to add to surface that's kind of flush and flat. So what I do is kind of come in and just make this more uniform. And then I put this aside as to make part of my handle out of whatever's excess. Again, if you have just water, wet fingertips, it'll keep this from sticking to you like it's sticking to me right now. Okay. So I know I'm long here. I don't need all that. Get rid of it. And I'll get my blade out in a minute and do a final trimming. Okay, so I'm going to open another package. Is this helpful?
Yes.
Alright, so I leave it on the sheet, okay? Because here, I know that I need a long piece that's going to come around and I'm going to need another long piece. So I kind of judge my thickness and I leave it on this so it doesn't stick to the counter. And I trim my line away. Then I can come back and lay this guy in here. So I'm going to overlap it slightly, okay? It doesn't have to be a lot because I don't want this tray to get too thick, right? I just want it to be pretty close. I want it overlapped though because a butt junction is not going to cure well and the risk of it coming off is pretty great. So I'm going to not risk doing that. I'm going to come back with my blade and go ahead and trim the excess away. So you can see I'm going at least to the level of my wax, right? And you can go a little bit longer than your wax layer if you want, but you definitely don't need to go all the way down to the depth. I'm going to leave that piece out. I'm going to do it again for the other side. This is like arts and crafts day in dental school. It's actually one of the reasons that I got into prosthodontics. I really liked the artistry of and the craftsmanship. It's very tangible work. Cross can be a lot of fun in that way. Okay, so I'm just strategically trimming this so that I maximize how much material I have. Now I know I'm going to put a tray handle on here in this area, so I'm not going to fill that void in right at the moment. Again, if your fingertip is wet, you can just kind of blend these together without having you'll see when you do it, it blends a lot better when your finger doesn't stick to it and it doesn't look rough. Okay, but you want to blend it nice and well. And I'm going to do a final trim on this side. And this is one of the reasons you want that land area clear, because when I'm trying to clean stuff out, if that land area is really tall, it just all gets shoved down in there and it's a pain to clean out. Alright, so now I have all this excess material over here. I'm going to use it to make a handle. And if you have extra that you're not using yet, fold it up and put it back inside this little black package and it won't cure on you and you can use it for your next one. The dental school will appreciate that. Stuff is actually ridiculously expensive. So I kind of form it, I roll it into a ball, and then I kind of form it into a square. You want it to be, you know, decent thickness that you can manage it, you can hold on to it. I'm going to come in and I'm going to set it about where I think it goes, and I'm going to get it initially tacked on here, just blending it together with a wet finger, and then I'm going to fill in that void area. Again, there are multiple ways to shape these handles, and I want you all to be able to have some autonomy in the way that you want your handle to function, but it's really important that it doesn't interfere with your border molding. Okay, so if that tray is out, like if this handle comes out like this, let me get it where you all can see it on that camera. Okay, and I try to pull my patient's lip down, it's going to bump into that, right? So I want this to go back more like an incisor or like a tooth that's coming out, so that the lip can come down and over when we're border molding that upper lip. Okay. I like to pinch it a little bit, put a little indentation in it so that I can grab a hold of it. Okay. Once I'm happy with it, remember I said you can't add your handle later, I can put it into the curing unit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to cure this one while I work on the mandible, and then I'll show you what this looks like when it comes out. Actually, let me go